This is going to blow your mind. It blew my mind, even though it doesn't take much to blow my mind, but it blew my head clean off my shoulders. Today we're going to be reacting to how strong the US military is in 2024. I'm going to guess this is probably, for 2025 as well. But the US military, they always upgrade and they always adding on new stuff to the army. But either way, I'm glad you're here. Let's do this.
There are 195 recognized countries in the world doing their best to navigate the unforgiving arena of global
Yeah, I ain't gonna lie, man. I did not know there was that many countries on. I thought there was about 32.
Politics. However, only one country among them has
95
been unrivaled as the world's supreme military power for years, the United States. And that's why it shouldn't be surprising that this military titan might be ranked as the #1 military power once again in 2024.
Okay.
To be fair, quantifying military power is a tricky endeavor, as the numbers don't always tell the whole story. However, the US's dominance extends far beyond mere
Do they not, though?
encompassing cutting-edge technological innovation, logistical prowess, and unparalleled operational capabilities that cement its status.
What does that even mean? What does logistical prowess mean? An unparalleled operational capability? Surely there's a less... Am I just not that smart, man? I'm starting to think that's maybe what this is. Do you guys know what all this means? I kind of know what this one means. Got the good technology. I don't know what these two are, bro.
Paralleled operational capabilities that cement its status as the world's preeminent military force. So in this video, we will play the numbers game, but we'll also look at what those numbers represent. Regarding the numbers, we'll primarily consult Global Firepower's military strength rankings, an annual report that comprehensively assesses military capabilities worldwide. For 2024,
this is a smart video, man.
And when it comes to the US's annual defense spending budget, calling it a substantial financial investment might just be the understatement of the century.
How much?
Why? The defense budget the US Congress approved for 2024 is a
I'm going to guess. I know this is going to be high. I'm going to say 20 million.
staggering $886 billion.
Okay, I'm a bit off. What? 886 billion with a B? What the absolute fuck?
Roughly 3.3% of the country's gross domestic product, or GDP. Though this number is insanely impressive in and of itself, it becomes mind-blowing when you consider how much other nations are spending on defense. The #2 nation, China, plans to spend $236.1 billion on
I didn't know the numbers were that big, though.
A notable 7.2% leap from the previous year.
Holy
this increase is even higher with the third-ranked nation, Russia, which intends to spend around $109 billion on national defense. Approximately 30% more.
Like, what do you mean defense? What, like fences and shit, and obviously weapons and vehicles and all that, and wages for the soldiers? Okay, you know what?
2023. As monumental as the difference between the US's military budget and the ones from the second and third ranking countries, it's also important to note that the US probably won't see any significant increases in defense spending anytime soon.
Yeah, I don't think you need to.
The increase in the US military budget was capped at 1% in 2023 thanks to a 2-year budget deal. But even after those 2 years pass, financial experts don't see significant changes in the US's military budget for at least 2 more years. Afterward, the experts estimate that the budget could gradually rise to $922 billion in 2035. But let's go back to the present for now.
Just make it $1 trillion.
What is the U.S. spending its military budget on?
Hey, let me tell you something. If you go to war with a country that's spending $1 trillion on defense, get the white flag out, man. Don't be doing it. You're gonna die. You're gonna lose. Okay? Don't do it.
The budget must cover numerous aspects of a standing fighting force. 4 areas might be the most crucial.
Do not do it.
Operation and maintenance, research and development of weapons and equipment, procurement of weapons and systems, and military personnel. Speaking of military personnel, number-wise, how strong is the U.S. military in 2024? Let's start with the total available military manpower. This figure refers to the total number of people a nation could mobilize in the event of a war, be it offensive or defensive in nature. Remember that this number can only be estimated and represents a rough picture of the potential force size, not an exact count.
Okay.
According to GFP estimates, the U.S. could commit almost 150 million people to its war effort, roughly 44% of its total population. Though this figure is undoubtedly impressive, it isn't the highest.
Wait a minute. What do you mean? Over 40%, 44% of the American population can be whipped into the military. Does that... Wait. Holy sh...
Of course, this shouldn't be surprising, as the U.S. isn't the most populous country in the world. That title belongs to India, closely followed by China, with each country having more than 1.4 billion people. With this discrepancy in population in mind, it's perfectly understandable 4 billion.
1.4 billion people there. What's bigger, America or India? Why do I feel like America? That's yo, that must be crammed as
people. With this discrepancy in population in mind, it's perfectly understandable that India and China rank better in terms of total manpower, both being able to commit over 650 million people to their respective war efforts.
That's insane.
A similar situation can be seen in the number of people fit for military service. As the name suggests, these are the able-bodied people who could theoretically fight or participate in material production during a long-running war campaign. The U.S. roughly has 124 million troops, while India and China can offer 4 to 5 times more.
That's scary. That's quite scary.
From potential scenarios, how many active duty personnel does the U.S. have in 2024? In other words, how many soldiers are currently engaged in full-time military work and could be ready to fight for the nation at any given moment? The answer is approximately 1.3 million highly trained individuals. Though this figure places the U.S. in the top 3 countries in the world, it's important to note that the number of active duty personnel has been declining for quite some time.
I feel like we need to get that back up, though.
The current figures are far from the most recent peak of over 2 million active duty soldiers.
Because the world's quite scary at the minute.
But what about reserve personnel? Unfortunately, this isn't.
Hey, you guys think the reason that there's maybe less military personnel, you know, actual soldiers, is because the technology that we got is getting better? So, like, the need for actual humans is kind of like, you know, isn't as much as what it used to be in the 80s, like I just pointed out there. Whereas to win a war now, all you kind of need to do is fly a couple of drones, you know what I mean? Do you think that's the reason?
U.S. shines
it has to be, right?
2024 military power ranking. But before delving into the details, let's explain the difference between active and reserve duty.
Okay.
Think of it this way. Active duty is a full-time job, while reserve duty can be compared to a part-time job. Reservists are considered an optional military component and are basically on call for service at any given moment. The U.S. has almost 800,000 of these reservists as part of its military force in 2024. The figure is nowhere near Vietnam's 5 million reservists, which occupies the #1 position globally.
5 million
it's also
reserves.
Significantly lower than 3 other nations in the top 5
in
the
my
military power ranking of 2024.
What are they planning, bro?
With over 3 million reservists, Russia with approximately 2 million, and India with roughly 1.15 million reserve duty personnel. The only other country in the top 5 with fewer reservists is China, which has 500,000.
500,000?
There are 2 ways to look at this number, one more positive and the other quite the opposite. On one hand, the relatively low number of reservists in the U.S. could be attributed to the country's reliance on a well-established active duty force and sophisticated military technology. On the other hand, the number of U.S. reservists could be related to how overused the military component is. As things currently stand, some reservists are expected to provide daily support to global military operations, essentially changing the very nature of this military element. This could have something to do with fewer people deciding to join the military as a reservist. But speaking of joining the military,
you can understand that though, right?
Which options do individuals have when considering enlistment in the U.S. military? The United States Armed Forces collectively manages 3 major service branches: the U.S. Army, the U.S. Air Force, and the U.S. Navy. In addition to the 3 main military branches, the U.S. has 3 other notable military divisions: the U.S. Marine Corps, the U.S. Space Force, and the U.S. Coast Guard.
Yo! Oh my god, what the hell is the US Space Force? Oh, wait a minute, I'm about to do a video on that shit.
The U.S. Coast Guard is the only exception, falling under the responsibility of the Department of Homeland Security. But what exactly are these departments managing in 2024?
You tell me.
Let's find out. First, let's get the numbers out of the way. Number 1 is the Army, the largest and oldest service in the U.S., with roughly 452,000 active duty soldiers. This is the smallest total the Army has been since 1940, a year before the U.S. joined World War II. In second place, we have the Navy, the U.S.'s forward deployed force. In 2024, this branch had approximately 347,000 active duty soldiers.
Holy shit, I didn't know that was the Navy was as big as that.
The U.S. generally isn't satisfied with the number, as it falls short of desired readiness levels and strategic objectives.
Hey!
Third-ranking branches...
We need to pump these numbers. I'm going to say, we got rookie numbers at the minute compared to Vietnam. They got 5 million people ready to go. They got 5 million in the reserves. We need to pump the numbers up.
Force, closely following the Navy, with approximately 324,000
Show me the Space Force.
active duty personnel. The Department of Defense describes the Air Force as having rapid, flexible, and lethal air and space capability.
Yep.
Next up, the Marine Corps. a component of the Department of the Navy, which accounts for about 172,000 of the U.S.'s active duty personnel.
You don't want to fuck around, boys, let me tell you.
This just leaves us with one more Department of Defense-controlled branch, the U.S. Space Force. Due to the unique nature of this branch, it shouldn't be surprising that it's by far the smallest, encompassing only about 9,400 active
even
personnel.
still?
It also makes it the smallest branch in the U.S. military in general.
I didn't know
as
there
the
was
Department
even...
of Homeland
I didn't think there would
Security
even be that
managed
much.
Coast Guard has
Bro, I
41,700
wanted to see what
active
the...
duty service members. However, the number of military personnel in each branch is just one aspect of their military might. The other, arguably even more important aspect, is the equipment and technology they possess. In this regard, we'll focus on 3 areas of attack.
I'm going to go ahead and assume this is where the most of the budget goes, right? The 900 or 860 billion or whatever it is. On the vehicles, the fucking, you know, the equipment.
Get U.S. land, air power, and naval power.
Hey, you can have...
We'll
Sorry for pausing again. I gotta say something. Whenever I need to speak, I need to get it out. You can have fucking 5 trillion people in reserves. See if we got a bomb big enough to kill them all. Goodbye.
On the ground. Though it took some time, the U.S. ground forces have finally started departing from the Cold War era thinking focused on containment. Slowly but surely, these forces are becoming significantly more agile and adaptable, reflecting the requirements of the modern battlefield. For this endeavor, the U.S. ground forces primarily rely on combat tanks, infantry fighting vehicles, artillery, and multiple launch rocket systems. So let's break down the U.S.'s capabilities in these departments.
Okay, break them down for me.
When it comes to tanks, the M1 Abrams continues to lead the way, making up for a good portion of the country's 4,657 tanks.
Jesus.
This figure makes the U.S. the NATO country with the highest number of tanks. However, the same cannot be said for the world, as this position belongs to Russia, which has over 14,000 tanks. While Russia's main battle tank,
they got old ones, though, do they not?
Is far inferior to the U.S.'s Abrams tanks. The same cannot be said for the T-14 Armada, which was designed to rival and even surpass its Western counterparts' capabilities. Regarding infantry fighting vehicles, the widely respected M2 Bradley remains a cornerstone of the U.S. ground forces, providing formidable firepower and mobility. However, we mustn't forget about the Stryker armored vehicles that have allowed the U.S. ground forces to cover a myriad of battlefield roles with as many as 10 variants of this Canadian-made vehicle. So it's no wonder that some 10% of all U.S. infantry fighting vehicles are Stryker armored vehicles. These include 1,789 M1126 infantry carrier vehicles, or ICVs, 545 M1127 reconnaissance vehicles,
what about the submarines?
441 M1129 mortar carriers, MCs.
We haven't got to see yet, have we?
348 M1130 commanders vehicles, or CVs.
Are they just like, do these have guns on them?
33 medical evacuation vehicles, or
are they just launchers?
The remainder of some 360,000 frontline, second line, and support vehicles
fucking rims
are
on there?
mostly wheeled types designed for urban fighting, based on experiences in Afghanistan and Iraq. This impressive figure also makes the U.S. the #1 country in the world in terms of infantry fighting vehicles, as they possess more than double these vehicles compared to the next countries on the list, China and Russia. Unfortunately, the U.S.
What's China doing over there, though? What are they doing over there? Because you never really hear from China these days, you know? They're just in there they're just in the background, you know what I mean? They're ready to pounce. I reckon they're up to something.
Artillery systems don't showcase the same superiority. Here, we'll look at 2 artillery systems, self-propelled and towed. Both these systems have a pretty self-explanatory name. The former can move independently on tracks or wheels, while the latter requires a separate vehicle to position it on the battlefield. The U.S. operates an equal number of both these systems. It has almost 1,600 self-propelled guns, and almost all of them are M109 Paladin tracked vehicles. As for their towed
I didn't know that was a thing.
There are about 1,267 of them.
So this is basically what a tank is, except it doesn't have the shit to drive it. So basically this on top of this gives you what's in front, right?
By the U.S. military. Roughly 820 of those are the M777 howitzer class systems, operated by the Army and Marine Corps.
I suppose
this just leaves us with
having to build
launch rocket systems.
an actual tank, right?
These systems aim to provide rapid and widespread firepower against ground targets, typically using rockets or missiles launched from a mobile platform. The U.S. ground forces operate almost 700 of these handy systems, with the M142 HIMARS launcher making up more than a quarter of the total number. Now, it's time to take flight. How does the U.S. rank in terms of air power in 2024?
Here we go.
The answer is simple. In the air, the U.S. is second in
There we go. Take me to
With over
space.
13,000 service-available airframes, the U.S. maintains the world's most formidable air force with a diverse fleet of aircraft. So let's inspect
what the hell's
this
that big
fleet
thing
in more
there, bro?
detail. The U.S. Air Force is one of the few services worldwide that operates a dedicated bomber fleet with aircraft capable of both conventional and nuclear attacks. The standout bomber aircraft in this fleet include the B-1B Lancer as the backbone of the U.S.'s long-range bomber force. The Air Force operates 39 of those high-level bombers, which can carry the highest payload of 75,000 pounds. The B-2 Spirit, it's a multi-role bomber.
I think they're my favorite, man. They're the coolest looking flight
Due to a high per-unit cost, only 21 of these aircraft are in the U.S.
That's all we
fleet,
need.
But the amount of firepower these units bring more than makes up for their modest number. The B-52 Stratofortress is a long-range heavy bomber that can fly at high subsonic speeds at altitudes of up to 50,000 feet. The U.S. force has used these bombers since the 1950s and operates 72 units. Next up, the U.S. Air Force's fighter aircraft fleet. These aircraft remain the frontline defenders for the U.S. Air Force, which operates as many as 1,854. Let's list the most notable among them. The F-15 Eagle is an all-weather, extremely maneuverable tactical fighter, represented by over 500 units. The F-16 Fighting Falcon is a compact multi-role fighter that's relatively low cost. That last factor explains why the Air Force operates 775 of these fighters.
Hey, do we have any guys in the comments that are watching this right now that have been in the U.S. military? If you do, let me know your story in the comments. I'd love to read through a couple of them. I really would.
22 Raptor is a supersonic.
Please, if anybody flew any of these, I need to know.
Perform both air-to-air and air-to-ground missions. The Air Force has 177 of these premier aircraft. The F-35A Lightning II, the U.S. Air Force's latest fifth-generation fighter, accounts for 310 units. Though these aircraft might be the first you think of, the U.S. Air Force fleet doesn't solely consist of aircraft designed to engage in combat or intercept other aircraft.
Like the
it also
UAVs.
includes aircraft designed for various other crucial missions, such as refueling, transport, and reconnaissance.
Okay.
Here are some of the
reconnaissance, whatever it is.
First up,
a UAV
tanker
in it?
aircraft designed to extend the operational range of other
there
aircraft.
We go. Get a refueled
the US
up.
Air Force has over 2,600 of these valuable aircraft, including the following: 388 KC-135 Stratotanker aerial refueling tankers, 61 KC-46A Pegasus aerial refueling and strategic military transport aircraft, 40 KC-10 Extender advanced tanker and cargo aircraft.
That's crazy, you know.
Transport aircraft, the U.S. Air Force.
Like, do you know how mad that is that these fucking things are carrying humongous other vehicles to other places? Like, in my head, that's crazy. It shouldn't be a thing. Shouldn't be able to be a thing.
Units of the most diverse design, with the C-17 Globemaster III as the primary hauler with 228 units.
Just hauling ass out there.
This fleet also includes limited numbers of special aircraft designed to transport VIP individuals, such as U.S. leaders and high-ranking government and Department of Defense officials. So, for instance, there's only one C-20 and 4 C-32 aircraft. When it comes to reconnaissance, the following aircraft play a significant role. 13 MC-12W Liberty, medium to low altitude, twin-engine turboprop aircraft. 14 E-8C Joint Stars Joint Surveillance Target Attack.
I feel like this is the most in-depth video I've ever seen in the military.
U-2S Dragon Lady subsonic high-altitude spy plane.
Subsonic?
Finally, two more notable pieces of equipment to cover: helicopters.
There's somebody behind me.
Unmanned aerial vehicles, or UAVs. The former category includes approximately 5,737 units, which are instrumental to the U.S. military. Due to their flexibility and tactical usefulness, these helicopters can be deployed to various missions, including search and rescue, medical evacuation, and special operations support. However, these rotorcraft units can also attack.
They're so cool looking, man.
1,000 dedicated attack helicopters
so cool looking.
that can provide on-call fire support for ground forces, neutralize armored vehicles, or counter dug-in enemy force elements.
Get them!
Lastly, unmanned aerial vehicles. This is another area where the U.S. absolutely demolishes any competition. The country's armed services operates one of the largest UAV forces, with over 16,000 units. These drones are primarily intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance types, or ISR.
See if you see one of them flying above your head.
Also included. Now that we covered the U.S.'s land and air power, let's dive into and explore the strength of the U.S. naval forces in 2024.
2024!
By now, you probably won't be surprised to learn that these forces
2025
also
times
beat out
2025.
potential competitors by a considerable margin. Sure, with 472 vessels, the U.S. might not have the largest fleet in terms of size.
It's enough.
However, the U.S. Navy boasts unmatched technological sophistication and operational
Technological
capability,
sophistication?
ensuring
What
dominance
does
in
that
both
mean?
traditional and asymmetric maritime warfare scenarios. The U.S. Navy also dominates the number game in areas where it matters the most on the sea: carriers. The U.S. currently has 11 carrier ships, which is more than all the other countries in the world combined.
Wait,
to be
what?
fair, 10 of these are the Nimitz-class nuclear-powered carriers that still utilize Cold War technologies to some extent. Still, they remain formidable assets, complemented by the newer, more advanced Gerald R. Ford-class supercarrier, which promises to take the U.S. military's naval capabilities to new heights.
Can that go under the water? Sorry, don't answer that. That's a stupid question. Sorry.
With 9 impressive warships. Even though these warships are smaller and less expensive to procure, other notable military forces are yet to keep up. Japan has the most helicopter carriers after the U.S., with only 4. But let's turn up the dramatics and discuss the more aggressive vessels in the Navy's fleet.
Yep.
And what better way to start than with destroyers?
Oh, here we go.
Destroyers are advanced multi-role vessels equipped with various sensory equipment, processing systems, and weaponry to counter threats from the air, the surface, and under the surface. These ships can operate independently of the main fleet.
So if somebody shoots a rocket at that under the water, it knows it's coming?
Their missions with unbelievable
like,
precision.
what the hell, man?
With all these characteristics in mind, you probably
live
won't
in the
be
future.
surprised to hear destroyers are rather costly to procure and operate. That's why only a dozen countries in the world own destroyers, most of them operating only a few of these powerful vessels. Of course, the same can't be said for the U.S., which owns as many as 75 destroyer-type ships, the most in the world.
75?
Among those destroyers, 2 classes are represented: the Arleigh Burke class with 73 destroyers, and the Zumwalt class with 2. Now, let's peek under the surface. There, you'll find an impressive fleet of attack submarines, combining Cold War relics with more modern and advanced entries. The first category is filled
submarines
with
are
vessels
awesome,
like
man.
the 26
They're so
Los
cool.
Angeles class, 18 Ohio
You'll never
class,
find me on
and
one,
3 Seawolf
but
class
they're cool.
attack submarines. The second boasts 24 Virginia class submarines that are gradually replacing their older counterparts. Now, while we have to go underwater to view this display of naval might, it's important to know that these submarines can also conduct land attacks.
What?
Some of them even through nuclear means. And don't get fooled by the name attack submarines, as these vessels can also be used for reconnaissance
That's
or to provide
crazy.
support during special forces operations. There are aspects of the naval fleet where the U.S. isn't the leading military force in the world. In fact, the U.S. doesn't even rank in the top 10 in some of them. But if you know anything about the country's determination, you know that this won't last for long. Take frigates, for example. Currently, the U.S. has 0 of these multi-role general-purpose vessels, which places it at the bottom of the 145 countries ranked by global firepower. Though keep in mind that the U.S. rarely uses frigates anymore.
Obviously not, wouldn't got any.
Powerful countries like Russia and China haven't followed suit. So the U.S. is getting back into the frigate game.
Oh, we're back in?
Construction started in August 2022 after a 35-year break, and the USS Constellation, the lead class of these vessels, should enter service around 2026.
Next year.
Other areas where the U.S. Navy
frigates are back.
falls short are, number 1, the Corvette-type vessels, which are very similar to frigates. Currently, the Navy operates 23 of these small vessels, which is almost 4 times less than the first-ranking country, Russia. Number 2, the mine and counter-mine warfare ships that lay down or neutralize minefields in strategic waters. As of 2024, the Navy owns 8 of these vessels, a far cry from the 47 owned by the same country.
Yeah, but that's
that
what they
owns the
use
most
over there.
Corvettes, Russia.
You know what I mean? They love it over there.
3,
We don't like them. We don't need them.
Marine Force. During wartime, these vessels transport soldiers, supplies, and vehicles. The U.S. owns around 1,800 merchant vessels, so it doesn't even manage to crack the top 10 leading maritime nations. Still, these very few items in no way detract from the extraordinary
This is like all that
military
stuff,
might that
the frigates
US
and then the ship carrying all the stuff. They're not needed. We got the stuff. We got the planes in the sky. Just do it whatever we need. You know what I mean?
And now
you don't need
understand why this nation has consistently been ranked #1 regarding overall military power and capability. All of this boils down to one vital question.
What is it?
How will the U.S. use its military might in 2024? There's a whole
2025.
barrage of ongoing military
pretending this
operations
is a 2025
that either
video.
involve the U.S.
I forgot what year it was at the
or
start.
through international organizations like the United Nations, the UN, the European Union, EU, or the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO. Here's a quick overview of the operations involving the U.S. in chronological order. Since 2004, the U.S. has been deploying drone strikes against Islamist militant groups in the
Throw
war
a drone
in
over.
Northwest
No need for
Pakistan.
any of these boats.
Since 2010, the same destiny has befallen Al-Qaeda, Al-Shabaab, and
Al-Shabaab.
ISIS positions in Yemen, resulting from the effort to combat the Al-Qaeda insurgency in the country. In 2011, U.S. troops were sent to Uganda as advisors to assist in the fight against the Lord's Resistance Army, or the LRA, and its leader, Joseph Kony.
Why didn't I never hear about
the US
that?
started interventions in Iraq and Syria, aiming to combat the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, or
Bastards.
ISIS. In 2021,
Terrorist
the U.S.
bastards.
continued its intervention in Somalia by conducting airstrikes on Al-Shabaab militants. In 2023, Operation Prosperity
Suck it,
Guardian was
Al-Shabaab.
launched in order to counter the threat by Houthi forces in the Red Sea. Besides conducting specific operations, the U.S. troops are always stationed across
Where's
different
this?
continents
Is it
to
Is it the
maintain
whole world?
regional stability, provide security assistance to partner
they're
nations,
everywhere,
conduct
like-
joint training exercises, or deter potential adversaries. So, as of 2024, the U.S. has over 100,000 service members in Europe, 30,000 throughout the Middle East, 375,000 in the Indo-Pacific region. From these numbers and the ongoing military
What the
operations,
flip?
it's easy to conclude where the U.S. stands on most matters
I never
in
knew
terms
that.
of foreign policy. For instance, Europe received another 20,000 American soldiers after the Russo-Ukrainian War began in 2022 to enhance its military capabilities. Similarly, the sheer number of troops in the Indo-Pacific region makes it clear that the U.S. prioritizes the so-called free and open Indo-Pacific strategy,
Don't know what that
which
means.
aims to uphold
Oh.
international norms and principles in the face of increasing assertiveness from
Nice.
countries like China. Did any of this information surprise you? For
All of it. Well, not really. Not that it surprised me. I knew it would be massive, but I didn't know it would be, nearly $1 trillion a year massive. Either way, guys, thank you for watching. Appreciate it. I'm definitely going to be doing a video on the US Space Force. That to me is crazy. Like, that's, I don't know what to expect. Anyway, make sure to like, subscribe so you don't want to miss that one. It's going to be cool. Thank you for watching. Thank you for your time. Appreciate you.